Hello YouTube. With Valentine's Day around the corner, I thought this would be the perfect time to make a new dating Q&A. But upon going over the questions that you guys left, I realized that one was coming back all the time. A question I also saw all over the internet, especially on 4chan. And that question was, how do I get a trad wife? Now, I think this is fascinating because this question in particular reveals a ton about modern men, modern women, but also the state of modern dating. So I decided to dedicate the entire video to that topic in particular. And my conclusion goes as follows. You won't. You won't be getting a trad wife, it's not possible. But it's not enough that I just tell you that. The interesting part comes afterwards. I'm going to explain to you exactly why you won't, why it's impossible, and why this is actually not something you should be shooting for. But before we actually do that, I have to define what a trad wife is, because some of you guys might be normies and have a life, so you don't know what that term is in the first place. A trad wife is a woman who remained pure before marriage, so she's a virgin. She wants kids, and she also wants to be a stay-at-home mom from the start. The from the start is important, meaning that you did not have to convince her that she wants these things. These are desires that she has to start with. She also will be subservient to the man, so she will take a secondary role within the household. She will be obedient, and these two last points are also very important, she will be pretty and she will be young. Let's begin with the chastity thing. There is an obsession with purity that is immediately evident with this question because a trad wife has to be a virgin. And many people would say that this is weird because nowadays apparently wanting a woman that hasn't been fucked 50 times is weird. It's even pointed out as being toxically masculine because the idea that the innocence or the purity of a woman could be soiled by her number of sexual partners nowadays is apparently very sexist. I would like us to go back to a time where this wasn't considered as sexist and instead was seen as a very important trait for a simple reason. If you look back at many patriarchal cultures, they promoted this idea that women needed to preserve themselves because it was the only way for them to have a fulfilling marriage, for many reasons. The first one is obvious, it's biological. It's because if you marry a woman and she has a kid afterwards, if she wasn't virgin before the marriage, you have absolutely no way to know that this is your offspring. Now again, in today's society, blood connections and blood links are not that important anymore. Many people will gladly raise a kid from someone else, and I have nothing against that, but many men are against that for a reason. There's a reason why a lot of men will sneak paternity tests to make sure that the kid is theirs. It's because you want to know that you're raising your own blood. You want to know that it's your own legacy. Some would say that this is a caveman mentality and you shouldn't worry about things like this, but it's rooted deep in our DNA as men. This is not something that is negotiable. So this is why the virginity of the woman is so important, or at least was in the past. Many cultures, like in Islam, for example, if I'm not mistaken, would actually verify by eye that the woman was still a virgin, that she still had an intact hymen, and if she did not, the marriage was being called off. Other cultures did that as well, and it still exists nowadays. It's only really outdated in the West. So that's for the biological purpose of virginity. Then there is the psychological one. So we know, thanks to studies, that women who have less sexual partners tend to stay married longer. They have a lesser divorce rate. They also tend to be happier in their relationship. All of these things are proven, which boils down to the notion that this insistence on purity doesn't come out of nowhere. It's just men one day who decided that virgins are better. It's just that there are clear cases that prove that, yes, marrying a woman that is, again, quote-unquote, preserved is smarter because it's going to prevent you from having to run into all of these issues. So that's why so many men want a trad wife. But I would like to point in this case that there is a problem with some of the points I just outlined, especially the last one, because it's absolutely correct that women who have less sexual partners tend to divorce less. But it could also be because they have no experience, meaning that it's certain that a woman will not necessarily want to leave a man, even if the man treats her poorly, as long as she has no idea he treats her poorly. To use a very disgusting analogy, if you've been drinking piss for your entire life, you have no way to know that drinking apple juice would actually be much more pleasurable. So you stick to piss. In this case, many women stick to piss. Anyone who knows boomer ladies in particular, so ladies in their 60s, 70s, can attest to the fact that they stay married to absolute thirds of men because they don't really have a choice, and most importantly, psychologically, they don't realize that they have a choice, that there are better options out there. This is not a good thing. You don't want a woman to stay with you just because she has no idea that the grass is greener somewhere else. Which also points down to the fact that the type of men who insist on having a triad wife do so because they know that when you are a woman's first, she has no other points of comparison, meaning that you can treat the woman however you want. You can treat her like shit. That is also something that I've noticed times and times again. Many women, especially very young women, who end up in abusive relationships are also in their first relationships because they have no idea that what they're going through is not proper. And since they never really had a father figure to show them by looking at the way the dad behaves with the mom that this is improper, they are ensnared in the relationship. Now, it's sad for these women, but it's sinister when you think about the fact that many men willingly want to enter a relationship with women who have less experience because it truly proves that they might themselves have sinister intentions. Which is why when you see men, especially men in their 20s, who hunt, there's no other word, hunt teenage girls, one, it's weird because of the age difference and the fact that the woman is not fully developed yet, but most importantly, it shows that the guy is doing this because he knows that he will have the ability to control a very naive young woman. It's called grooming for a reason. Now, I'm not saying that men who want a triad wife are going to groom their wife, but that is a possibility to keep in mind. And it also, in my opinion, speaks to the insecurity of these men. Because if you need your woman to have no prior experience, you also deep down understand that this could be because you don't compare properly to these other experiences. So you're not going to be able to actually match what she already knows, meaning that if you had met that woman later on in life, she would have never even looked at you because she has had better in the past. I also don't think that this is a good thing. As a man, you want to be top dog. You want to be a great catch. You don't just want to be her only catch and that's the only thing that she can have and that's it. And in that situation, you won't have to worry about her other experiences anymore. Of course, we're talking within the limitations of reason. Don't go marry someone who has been run over. As we say in French, il y a que le TGV qui lui est pas passé dessus. That's not a good idea. But overall, for the most part, if you are at the top of her charts anyways, you will never have to worry about past or future competition. I see that a lot with modern men as well, who seem to be so insecure that they are constantly worried that their woman is going to run away with the first man that comes across their path. I have personally never worried about that once in my life, and it's because I'm confident. And it's true that women will happily ditch you to find a better catch, but again, if you're the best catch and if you treat the woman right, there will be no problem with that. So that was for the entire purity thing. And I think that this purity thing relies on a double standard that I'm certain you've heard in the past. It is the lock and key analogy. It's the idea that if you let a woman be loose and she doesn't preserve herself, she, in a sense, behaves like a lock that can be opened by any key. But if you are a man, you are the key. And a key that opens 1,000 locks is a master key. It's a very good key. That is an obvious double standard between the genders. I personally have nothing against that because I think that there should be double standards between genders because we are not the same biologically and psychologically. However, it is perfectly, I think, acceptable that women would point that out and say and claim that requiring purity from women and absolutely nothing from men is highly hypocritical. You see that in many cultures, I don't even need to cite, where it's on the woman to be chaste and to hide her body and her curves, because if she doesn't, she's a slut or a whore. But a man that is going to actively seek out a girl that could be modestly dressed because she shows a tiny bit of skin, there's no problem with that guy. I think that this is a problem because it also encourages men to be lowly pigs. And that's not what I think should go through. I think that men should be held to super high standards, much higher standards than women. But I was led astray by my own tongue for a second here. Let's go back to this lock and key analogy. I just explained to you that I disagree with it to some extent, but I also think it's not 100% wrong. There is some truth in this, and the truth is that in this case, women are much closer to locks than they are to keys because sexual intercourse impacts women more than it does men. Many feminists will tell you that it's nonsense, that we have the same approach to sex. That is bullshit. The very difference of sexual organs and the way we receive and experience sex as an animal completely shifts and changes the perspective we have about it and the way it impacts us. The first truth is that biologically, of course, we are not equal when it comes to sex. Women can get pregnant, which is why you might have heard in the past some people say that safe sex is a woman's responsibility. It absolutely is, because they are at a higher risk when it comes to sex going wrong. If for example, if it produces offspring that are not wanted. So that is the first one. And that biological trait and quirk of womanhood also verses into the psychological, because if you look at the way men and women interact with their sexual partners, you will realize that women tend to bond. They tend to create strong links with any sexual partners that they've ever had. And at this point, we even know that their body itself does it. Their body retains DNA from every single man they ever had sex with. This is insane, but it's not surprising at all. They receive, they don't give. For men, it's easier to go from conquest to conquest and not feel attached whatsoever, which is also why hookup culture and one-night stands are really just part of a man's journey, and they only really fit men to some extent. Any woman who tells you that she's fulfilled just getting fucked by some guy on the side is lying to herself, because she has been told that it's cool to be just a colostomy bag for semen, even though deep down she's suffering, because every single time she gets fucked, she gets attached to the guy, and then the guy ditches her like a Kleenex to go grab another Kleenex to empty his balls into. I've spoken about that in length in the past. This is not the topic of the video. But it's to speak to the psychological difference between the two sexes. And this is also why, to connect back to the idea of the first boyfriend for women, the first time a woman has sex is key. I have known in my life many women who had sex with one guy and they were eternally bound to that one guy. They could never detach themselves emotionally to that one guy, and most often they ended up with that guy, which also speaks to the importance of female virginity, because this means that whoever you give that first time to has now power over you as a woman. And because virginity nowadays is nothing, it's like giving away a dollar bill, women don't think about that anymore. But it doesn't stop the fact that psychologically it's still occurring. Whereas for men, your first time, I mean, it means something emotionally, but deep down in terms of evolution, we did not evolve to be attached to our first time, because it would be detrimental to the species. We needed to have the ability to go from woman to woman. Whereas for women, it was detrimental if they were just fuck, get pregnant, have the kid, and then leave the kid to die. We needed the kid to be taken to fruition, into adulthood. So it makes a lot of sense then that the woman would be attached emotionally to the man, because it would then spur her on to try to get the man to stick around, which is, again, usually something that women do. Nowadays, it's the other way around, because we're just completely inverted in terms of values and the way society works, where many men nowadays have to convince the woman to stay after sex, which makes no sense whatsoever. But back then, it was that way, and it still is that way evolutionary, because our brains have not yet managed to match this modern era. I'm not going to go about that too much. I could go on and on to explain that. But again, it was to underline the fact that this focus on purity that stems from the trad wife archetype is explainable by many means, and even the lock and key analogy is not that stupid if you actually look into it. The problem being that I just told you that this doesn't really work anymore, because it's not really what's going on anymore if you actually look at modern society. Nowadays, open your windows, look at the dating scene. The advent of modern dating has put the entire thing on its head. Everything is upside down. So expecting these standards to hold, and even expecting women to understand what I just told you, is completely insane. It's absolutely impossible. If you expect women to inherently understand what is good for them, and therefore also good for society, you are in for a rude awakening. Because it's not gonna happen. So this double standard nowadays is completely null, and you cannot expect women to stick to these traditional standards anymore. Nowadays, for example, women have birth control. So everything I just explained to you about pregnancy goes out the window, because, well, they know they won't get pregnant. So the attachment portion of their psychology can just completely alienate itself. It won't make a difference. You also have to keep in mind that women are constantly encouraged to hook up to enjoy themselves. I told you at the start that the reason why women engage in hookup culture in the first place is because the media has started to normalize it. The reason why women were not doing it in the past is because society was shunning it. It starts and ends there. It's not an inherent understanding of good and bad that is pushing women towards action or inaction. It's just what society tells them is acceptable. And since hooking up now makes you look cool and makes you look badass in the eyes of parts and portions of youth culture, you cannot expect women not to do it. You have to understand that, as sad as it is, sex is no longer the act of creating life. It's no longer sacred. Sex is now just another branch of capitalism. It's a way to make money. Look at porn. Sex is everywhere. Even on YouTube, you want people to click on your video, talk about sex, put a naked lady in your thumbnail. If you want to get views on your video and you're a female pianist, don't be good at the piano, just wear a cleavage and you'll get 1 million views. All of these are strong biases, sexual biases of the human spirit that have slowly shifted the way we understand sex. So, to demand of a woman that she retains the traditional values that were attached to what sex used to be when sex itself is not what it used to be, in my opinion, is delusional, because sex nowadays is reduced to a purely hedonistic activity. Any notions of creating a family because of sex or having kids via sex is, in a sense, almost seen as an inconvenience. The woman will get an abortion, she will take birth control, she will retain sex for its pleasurable aspects, and the rest, the part that actually matter the most, she will ditch away because she has been told that this is what makes her emancipated, this is what makes her free. And I believe that in this environment, in this modern environment, asking for a woman to preserve herself is like asking a starving kid to not eat unattended candy. It's unreasonable. You cannot expect that to happen. And I know that for some of you who will just sit there and cross your arms and tell me, well, they have to do it anyways, it's for the good of society. Women don't give a fuck about the good of society, okay? It's not something that they care about at all. In this scenario, they will look at their benefits and what they can get the most from, and they will just go with that. So if you're a young woman nowadays, in a second you will realize that you can get unlimited attention and pleasure from hookups, so you'll do it. If you're, I was going to say a pretty chick, if you're a chick, if you have tits and a vagina, you can go to any bar, and as Patrice O'Neill would say, you can point to a guy, not even say anything, just point to a guy, then point to your vagina and say, eh. You will get laid. That on that night you will get laid. If you, a man, attempts this, you will get arrested by the police. This is the difference between men and women. Women can have unlimited sex. They can have unlimited candy, and you expect them to not do it. This is the mindset of someone who cannot put themselves in the shoes of the opposite sex. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's also deeply hypocritical, because I know for a fact that many of you guys, if you had that possibility, you would do it. If you could fuck any woman you want, you would do it. Don't tell me that you would preserve yourself or that you would be virtuous. All that is nonsense. You're only as virtuous as your options. It's very easy to preserve yourself when no woman wants your ass. Very easy. It's much tougher, however, when you have a lot of people out there who are willing to do whatever to get into your pants. You wouldn't know that, however. And the proof of that is the fact that most men watch porn. And what is porn if not a replacement for sexual activity? The sexual market is dry nowadays, and 80% of men can't get laid, but it's not like they sit in a cave and practice abstinence, they jerk off to porn. In a sense, they're replicating the type of sexual activity they would have had if they could actually get access to women. So they're doing the exact same thing that women are. They're chasing pleasure, and therefore sitting back and telling women that what they're doing is bad or sinful is deeply hypocritical, because you would do the exact same thing. For a woman, if you're pretty, you can make a living selling pictures of your feet. You can make a living selling your panties. Women don't care if these things are bad or sinful, whatever. They just know that it gets them resources. Once again, I ask you, if someone was willing to pay for a shirtless picture of you $500, would you do it? If you tell me no, very good for you, but understand that there is a reason why bodybuilding is plagued by gay for pay. It's because there's a bunch of straight dudes who are willing to sell pictures of themselves to ugly trolls in the LGBT community because it's an easy way to make money. Deep down at the root of every human interaction and really the human spirit is selfishness and the desire to get more for ourselves. Women are not different than men from that standpoint. They do the exact same thing. I think that this sort of buries your dream of a trad wife, because you have come to understand that to get a trad wife, you would want and need a girl that managed to instinctively understand all of the traps of hedonism I just described, because they are traps, and preserve herself. which is impossible because what I just described to you, most women don't understand. Some women do, but most, especially young women, because of course you want a young woman, you don't want someone who's 55, do not possess the ability to understand that because they're too caught up in pleasure. Young men are the exact same thing. Go tell a young guy who's 22 and who's pulling tail every single night at the bar that what he's doing is destroying his ability to have a family down the line. He will laugh in your face and he will tell you to go fuck yourself and call you a virgin. Why? Because he's getting what he wants. Exact same thing happens here for women. Now, to get back on that notion that women have no inherent sense of what is good for them, and also to explain to you why essentially you're asking for a unicorn when you ask for a woman that instinctively manages to understand that she needs to preserve herself, I think it's important that you perceive the way women function within society. I think that many men project the way they feel or would like to feel, or they have clear ideas of this is bad, this is good, and this is something you see with people who want a trad wife. They have a traditional idea of what society should be like, and they think that everyone should understand how it is, meaning also that when they do try to explain to others, especially women, why they should behave in a certain way, they're absolutely incapable of convincing anyone because they have no arguments. They can just tell you, well, this is good and this is bad. Women are not receptive to that type of argument. In reality, no one is. You have to have the ability to articulate why this would be good for them. To convince women, for example, to renounce hedonism and hookup culture, you have to be able to exemplify exactly why this is bad, why it hurts them, and show to them their future. Explain, okay, you do this now, and in the future, this is what you're going to have to deal with. All of the damage is going to come down to this, and this is going to be your situation. If you can convince a woman with these methods that she would be better off renouncing these ways, the modern way of dating, then you would actually manage to convince them in droves, because, to repeat the bold claim that I'm going to prove to you, women have no inherent notion of virtue or what is good for them, because they are hyper-conformists who follow societal trends. It has always been true, it's still true to this day. What we call modern feminism is women following another trend. The vast majority have never stopped to think about it. They never actually question whether or not it's good for them. They have been told this is the way to live your life, and they do it. The proof that I have of this is that feminism, the way it was intended to be, was to open up choices for women and restore their freedom. In a sense, let them be who they wanted to be. Is this what you see nowadays in the media with third wave feminism? Absolutely not. Feminism dictates to women the way they have to live. You have to get a career, you have to shun motherhood, you have to reject men, etc., etc. All of these things women follow, not because they think deep down that it's for the greater good, they don't give a fuck about the greater good. They have been told, however, that it's going to make them the happiest, and because they conform to the larger trends of society, they just follow that larger trend. This might also be a black pill for some of you guys who thought that your traditional wife of 300 years ago was doing that because she understood deep down that she was the fabric of society. I say that's bullshit. In the past, women followed patriarchal standards because it was what made them the happiest, in the sense that it gave them a chance of having a family and it gave them a chance of having a stable household and resources. It starts and ends there. I actually have a little paper here that is going to go deeper into that specific topic. Yeah, so women weren't traditional because it was virtuous, they were traditional because it's what gave them the best life. Once you understand this, you're going to have a much easier time to understand women, which also means that women will always go for the highest bidder. If a new societal trend comes and replaces patriarchy and tells them that there's something better out there, they will go for that something better out there. They don't care. I also would like to outline the fact that traditional society didn't really give women a choice. So you can hate feminism as much as you want. Feminism at the end just replaced traditional society by forcing and funneling women into roles that it decides for them. But it's the same with the past. In the past, a woman had to be a housewife. She had to be subservient to the man. She also didn't have a choice. So it's easier to claim that women in the past were doing this because they were pure angels and understood perfectly that they were doing something right. I disagree entirely, because they were forced to do that. And I also should explain to you why women don't preserve themselves nowadays. It's not because they're whores or sluts or whatever name you want to assign to them. It's simply because there is no society around them anymore to tell them that these things are wrong. So because no one is telling them that these things are wrong, they don't inherently know it, so they just don't preserve themselves and they go for the pleasure. In the past, the elements and entities that were teaching young girls that were, for example, other women who would guide their daughters, for example, on the right path, or most importantly, other men. It was men who were pressuring women into remaining pure. A dad didn't want her or girl to get fucked by a random dude because he understood that it was going to ruin her chance of having a happy life within a patriarchal society. But all of that is out of the window nowadays. Most young women, the other women around them, are spinsters or they're from third wave or second wave feminism themselves, so they're never going to teach them these lessons. And the men, the fathers, the people that call themselves fathers nowadays, are just spineless cowards. They would never dare tell these things to their little girl, even if they knew it would make the woman happiest, because they would be afraid of being sexist or promoting misogynistic values, etc., etc. So all of this is gone, and because all of this is gone, the pressure, the societal pressure, is also gone, and we're left with the society that we have nowadays. This is what we're dealing with, and that explains why women opted out of tradition. It's not because they seek to destroy modern society or Western society, and for the most part, it's not even because they want to crush the patriarchy. That's just a feminist myth. They do so because they have been promised that if they took the other way, the path of, again, liberation, they would be freer and they would be happier. So they did that. They stopped relying on men. And if you stop and think for a second, also wonder what men had to do to convince women that feminism was correct. If you have a woman that's very happy in her marriage, you're going to have a tough time telling her and convincing her, most importantly, that she would be happiest without the man. Meaning that there needed to be roots and seeds of discontent within females to be convinced. It's like the serpent in the Garden of Eden. If there wasn't a certain level of desire for knowledge within Eve, she would have never bit into the fruit. Likewise with modern women. They simply were promised a better life, and just like you would have done it, they went for that better life. Understand that there was a direct imbalance in happiness between men and women in the traditional society that you like so much. As much as it did benefit women to an extent, it also, for the most part, was created to benefit men. Now, I'm not saying that the patriarchy exists only and solely for the benefit of men. I'm saying, however, that for the patriarchy to be taken down, there needed to be some problems within it, and that problem was the issue of choice. Women wanted the choice. We're going to see that they did not do with that choice what would have actually made them happiest, but it is the reason why feminism was so effective. The people who promoted feminism and pushed it onto women were not interested in their happiness or in the betterment of their condition at all. It was all a lie to increase capital by having them join the workforce and open new bank accounts. They fell for the bait, they swallowed the hook like line and sinker, and now they're left in the middle like, what the fuck happened? And this is why I told you that showing some empathy and being able to put yourself in the shoes of women would serve you greatly, because it will also make you understand that many modern women nowadays realize what I just told you. They realize that feminism was it was a scheme. It was a way to dupe them, to lure them outside of the house, to put them into a cubicle somewhere so they could work and increase capital, but it was never to make them happier. The issue is that, one, they will never admit it, because admitting it would be having to admit the fact that depending on men wasn't so bad, and that, in a sense, going back to men is the way forward for modern women, but most importantly also because there's no way out for them. The situation that exists nowadays dictates that it is not possible now for a woman to try to go back to a more traditional way of life. If you have opened your eyes, you have realized that many women want that. They want to do the entire trad wife thing, but they can't. And they can't because what they did to the economy by joining it made it so that it is now impossible to go back in time. Look at the cost of living nowadays. If you want to have a household with a family, one salary ain't gonna cut it unless you make bank, because life is just way too expensive. So you will most likely need the two parties to work, and women look at that and say, shit, I don't actually like to work. I was told I was going to like it was going to make me happier, but I just ended up becoming a slave to my boss instead of being a quote-unquote slave to my husband. At least my husband liked me, and I certainly wasn't having to work 60 hours a week to be able to actually provide for myself, so I want to go back. But I can't, because not only is the economy not suitable for that anymore, but the worst part is that during that time period of modernity where women shifted because of feminism, men shifted as well. You think we stayed the same? You think you're the same that a guy in the 50s? Fuck no. Modern men nowadays are just as untraditional and degenerate as modern women. So, since again women are hyper-conformists, they would go back to traditional way of life if there were trad men available and a traditional society to support their traditional lifestyle, but there are none. There is a penury of traditional men, and this is really the crux of the issue. You're not getting a traditional wife because society is not going to support that transformation, but most importantly because you can handle it because you're most likely not traditional yourself. In which case, I ask the question, why would women save themselves for something that doesn't exist? That would be stupid, actually. I would call that behavior stupid. Women have always been very good at finding their next meal. It's what has made the species survive. They always know what mate to select so that the offspring can survive. They always know when it's time to turn coat and join the enemy or when their village is being invaded. They've always done that to preserve the species and also, of course, to preserve their own asses. So nowadays, they make the logical call and they say, all right, well, I clearly can't rely on men anymore, so I'm going to rely on the only thing that I can rely on, which is myself, which is, by the way, a lie. It's not really on themselves that they rely, it's on the system that is offering them easier alternatives, in a sense, things like OnlyFans, which also, once again, connects to the idea that preserving yourself in this day and age as a modern woman actually might be a bad call, because what if you preserve yourself and you're in your 30s and there's no man to take care of you? You just played yourself. Understand that the women who end up spending all of their beauty capital on selling themselves out to random strangers on the internet will also realize that it was a bad investment. The good investment for women is use your 20s to select and secure a strong man that is going to take care of you. That way, when your beauty runs out, you have someone who actually sticks by your side because you have given them children. Many women can't do that nowadays anymore because there's no man to actually create the other half of the kids, so it's not going to happen. And this is a very interesting psychological and even philosophical question. The question of heterofatalism. Heterofatalism is the idea that women like men. Like deep down biologically, they like us, but they don't quite understand why. They don't understand the reason. Why exactly am I supposed to like dudes? What is a guy going to bring to me outside of the fact that I want him to fuck me? What else is there? And the problem is that for most women, they can't answer that question, and that is sad. In the past, the traditional and patriarchal society answered that question for them. The answer was, if you don't get a man, you will not be able to survive because you're not allowed to get a job, so you're forced, which most likely will mean that you're going to have kids, and if you want those two things to occur for your survival, you better stay pure. So everything connected, and it was logical in the head of a woman that this was the way forward for her own preservation. Nowadays, it's not so clear anymore. Many women, every single woman on earth can provide for herself. She has the physical ability. She might not want to, but she can, and that makes all of the difference because it means that the key aspects of what made traditional wives is not there anymore. But as I explained, this ability to provide for themselves doesn't make women happy because it was never what they wanted to do in the first place. Women want a peaceful, easy, I insist on the easy, and in a sense, effortless life. But they can't have it, as I already explained, so the safer choice is to renounce it, to actually work, to become more independent, which in a sense takes them out even more of the traditional lifestyle that would make them happy, because the more a woman works, the more she can make her own money, the less she needs a man, the more education she gets, the less men are attractive in her eyes. Women who have high education and make a high salary will never date someone and marry someone that is lower on the totem pole ever. Men can do that. A billionaire can date a cashier, he doesn't care. Why? Because the characteristics that he seeks in women are beauty and fertility. That's it. It starts and ends there. In women, what they want from a man is the ability to provide for themselves and the ability to provide security. If these two can already be taken care of by the woman, or if worse, no man can match her own ability to do that, well, she certainly will not be doing that. Does it make her happy? Absolutely not. It's why I said in a previous video that feminism killed love. Not because it's bad to give women a choice, but because by giving women a choice, these standards are now so high that many women, in a sense, price themselves out of a husband because nothing is going to be good enough for them. That is heterofatalism 101, and it's the reason why men are not subject to heterofatalism. Men are not sitting there asking themselves, why do I need a woman in the first place? We know we want a woman. We know we need to actively seek out one. Women are not so optimistic about this entire state of thing. And the solution to this is not to scream in their face like a lot of these anti-feminists would do, but instead to find a way to convince them, and more than convince them, to prove to them that yes, they do need men, they do want men, and there are clear and logical reasons as to why. Now that you understand the factors that made women traditional in the first place, I think that it doesn't surprise you to hear that the few organic trad wives that are available out there are extremely rare. Because we're essentially talking about a woman that managed to resist hookup culture, so she is resistant to cheap pleasure. She managed to resist attention from social media that is absolutely everywhere, and she also managed to survive the feminist brainwashing that would have put her in a situation where she would eventually start to experience heterofatalism. So in a sense, we're talking about a unicorn. I'm going to be honest with you guys. A pretty virgin that has insane value on the dating market, well, that woman is going to be taken like when she's 18 immediately. She won't be available for very long. Now, I underlined the word pretty, and I think we're going to stop here for a second because I glossed over it, but it always makes me laugh. Many men, when they ask a trad wife, they don't really care that much about the other stuff. I mean, it's important that the woman is a virgin, etc. But the one defining trait that will make or break her attraction towards that woman is not her virtue, it's her attractiveness. Don't give me that shit. I know for a fact that if I presented to you one of the many trad women I know who are in their late 20s, 30s, who are only looking and not smoke shows, you would reject them. Because what you really want is not to have a family, it's not to have someone to love, it's to have someone pretty at your arm. Every man is like this. Again, we seek beauty and fertility, and I understand. I just wanted to point that out because, again, it shows that trad men are not that traditional anymore. Dudes in the past were traditional. Like, the generation of my grandpa, they would pick like the ugliest looking women because they didn't care. Their goal was not to have something pretty in the house, it was to have something to make kids with and to create an empire with. All of that to say that this obsession over attractiveness is not very traditional and is most likely the reason why you are never going to get a trad wife. Because if you think about it for a second again, this pretty virgin of your dreams is going to be the number one thing on the block, right? She's like a beautiful mansion that everyone wants to buy. And so she will have suitors that are going to be lining up around the block with a ton of money in their pocket. Men who are going to be very good looking, who are going to make a ton of money, who are going to have a ton of power. And then there's you. Stop for a second and ask yourself, am I worth the woman of my dreams? Am I worth that trad wife that I've been imagining in my head? Because understand that even in the past, that woman that you wanted was still going to have high value. But nowadays, I mean, you're essentially showing up to a house showing for a mansion with a $5 bill in your pocket and you're expecting to get the house. You're not going to get the house. It's absolutely impossible. Why would that woman choose you? Why would a woman that survived the assaults of hedonism, feminism, and the modern world end up with you? Honestly speaking, if you were her, would you pick yourself? That's a great question to ask because I think that the answer is no. If you were honest with yourself, the answer would be no. Just like if you had the ability to get money by showing pictures of your body, you would do it. All of these things that women go through, that men resent them for, they happen to women because, well, women don't really have the ability to resist them. The temptation is way too high. Are you kidding me? But one that would resist all of that, this unicorn I was speaking of, would most likely never actually pick you. And even if she did pick you, understand one thing. A trad wife is not just an ornament in your kitchen that makes you food and sucks your dick. She demands things. Actually, this new generation of women demand very little compared to the traditional women of the past. A woman nowadays, you date her, she makes her own money, she buys her own food and clothes, or she will want you for affection once in a while. It's sad because it's the divorce of the two genders and why people don't really need each other anymore in that fashion, and why heterofatalism is so prevalent. But the opposite, the trad woman, is also not necessarily something that you want. A trad woman depends on you for absolutely every single thing. Are you okay with that? Are you willing to do that? Can you provide that level of care and attention? Because if not, again, you're just going to be an abusive asshole. Right? Again, if what you want in a trad wife is someone who's going to shut their mouth and just obey you, I mean, it's not a trad wife that you want, it's a slave. These are not the same things. There is a reason why women in the past followed men in the past. Some of it was because they didn't have a choice, but it was also because men in the past were highly virtuous. And it wasn't this weird dog-master relationship that many men who want a trad wife think they're going to get. If you have family, especially from patriarchal cultures like Mediterranean, Latino, Arabic, whatever, you can attest to the fact that your grandma runs the fucking house. She's not a dog to your grandpa. If anything, it's the other way around. The grandpa wields the power in name, but the person who actually is puppeteering in the shadows is the grandma. Our grandmas were actually very feisty, and expecting a trad wife without that feistiness, in my opinion, is again just expecting a dog. And I read recently something interesting with the relationship between men and dogs. It was a very feminist take, but the idea was that men love dogs so much because dogs will love you unconditionally and obey your every order without expecting anything in return. I think that it summarizes the problem, but I think that the person who made that point actually has a good point. If you're the type of person who wants a trad wife because you think it's going to give you control, most likely it's because you lack control of your own life, you're insecure, and you want something to exert your control over because it's going to make you feel better. In truth, I believe that it is a trait of a weak man to seek a weak woman. A strong man would not be afraid of a strong woman because he knows that he can rein her in, and he doesn't even really have to do that. The woman will follow her naturally because she will know that it's in her best interest to follow the strongest. It's very easy to take a step down and to let someone else run the show if you know that the person has value, right? Look at emperors. You had men of great value, generals who followed the emperor blindly and were willing to die for him because they had decided that this person knew better than them. That's still possible. In this modern dating world, you have many women who would happily let the man make all of the decisions as long as they decide that the man is worth making decisions. If you're not, if you're weak, if you're poor, if you're ugly, all of these things, these are traits that are going to convince the woman that not only does she not want you to take decisions, she necessarily also doesn't want to have a life with you because you can add absolutely nothing to her life. In a sense, we are living in the hardest time in history to date and to get a wife, which is not a bad thing. I know that many people think it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing because you suck. You don't like it because you're low value, and this is this obsession over the traditional lifestyle of the 40s and 50s that I see nowadays, where essentially what men want is they want to get back to a time where women had no choice, no say to the chapter, and when they could just be complete slobs with no value. But the problem is that none of that is even true. This idea that women in the past were just obedient for nothing in return is completely contradicted to what I just explained. They were obedient because they had something to gain. You have nothing to provide them anymore, so even if you did manage to find a woman who has traditional values, you would not be able to fulfill your part of the deal for her to stay traditional, so she will absolutely not be doing that. And I know these things are not nice to hear, but it's to remind you that in the past, men needed to have value to secure women. There were rites of passages. You had to prove your worth. There were even cultures where you are not allowed to take wife until you proved your worth. Or even most recently in history, where the dad would not give his daughter to just any random loser. He would first and foremost check to see if you had what it took to actually take care of his baby daughter for as long as she lives. Can you do that? In today's society, in today's economy, can you do that? If you can't, instead of obsessing over a trad wife that has to be all this perfect creation that is pure and maintained, focus on you. Are you pure? Are you high value? If the answer is no, forget about having a trad wife. Instead, try to fix yourself. Which is why I also have started to believe that the trad wife obsession is, in a sense, a form of demoralization plot. Because it's telling men, oh, don't even bother working on yourself, because even if you did work on yourself, look at women nowadays, they have no value. So you do that for nothing, right? It is only worth working very hard for this perfect trad wife that is impossible because, well, the environment doesn't sustain the existence of such a species, and therefore it has disappeared. In a sense, it's having such high standards that you justify inaction. You see that many times with people where they will set up a goal, and the goal will be so out of reach that, in a sense, they sabotage themselves from the start because they will never even start because the goal is not achievable. It's like if I told you that I will only marry a 19 feet tall woman, and then I start complaining that there's no women for me and the dating market is fucked. Well, of course, look at what I'm wanting. I want something that doesn't exist. I want a unicorn. Instead of wanting that unicorn, why don't you become the unicorn? That way, best case scenario, if one day you come across one, you'll be a good match for her because, as I explained previously, with that obsession over the triad wife, if by luck you come across one, she won't want you. She won't even look at you twice. So as a conclusion, it's not women's responsibility to embody traditional values because they have never done that in the past. Times and times again, good, virtuous women were only good and virtuous because they had a man in their direct family or that they were married with that told them that this was the way to be, and society as a whole corroborated that message, so they followed suit. Nowadays, because men have let go of traditional values, society itself has devolved, and there is nothing anymore, no environment to encourage the creation of triad wives. If you really wanted one, the best thing to do would be to turn yourself into a man that would be worthy of one, which, if you're lucky, would also encourage other people to do so because it would increase competition amongst males, which would then promote the creation of a more traditional society, which would then eventually result to more traditional women because they would, one, realize that, hey, now society can support my lifestyle of not actually having to get a job, and two, they would see that there is ample evidence that there are men out there that can support them, so they wouldn't have to resort to other means to actually fulfill themselves or provide subsistence to themselves. If you expect women to magically fix themselves without all of these factors being transformed first, then you are just deluding yourself with, again, this myth of the triad wife, because triad wives at this point you have understood aren't born, they're built. So either you get the lucky one, the unicorn, and you also happen to be someone with high enough value as a male that she will even be interested in you, in which case, good for you, you have a triad wife. Or, and this is going to be for 99% of other men, you're going to have to make your own. You're going to have to, quote unquote, build your own triad wife, meaning you're going to end up with a modern woman that is going to be fucked in the head just as much as you are fucked in the head, but because you know what is good, you are going to embody these traditional values, which will convince her that this is the way to go, because you will prove to her that if she follows you, she will get a better life, a safer life, etc., etc. And all of the rest is going to naturally follow suit. It's the same for kids. If you date a modern woman, she will not want kids because society has brainwashed her into not having kids. And in her head, she thinks that she's better off without them. So she won't have them. It's as simple as that. But if you can prove to her that having kids would be a good thing for her life, then she would actually do that, and you would do great good in the world because, objectively speaking, it is correct that having kids is the optimal choice for a woman. One, because it fulfills her biological imperatives. Many women in their 40s or 50s go cuckoo in the head because they never had kids, and it's something that, in a sense, destroys their psyche. And on top of that, it's also the smart choice for women because when you secure a man, you secure a provider and a defender for as long as he's alive, and when he's dead, because men die earlier than women, now you have kids to take care of you. This is why women in the past had children. They might not have known why they were doing it, but that's exactly what they were doing it. Society as a whole functioned as a unit to preserve said unit and also to help every single part of the unit. But before that unit can be recreated anew, the individuals within it need to change. If you're the type of person that just waits for society to change to become better, well, you'll still be a turd in 5 years, 15 years, and 50 years, and you will die a turd. You are the influence on society and not the other way around in this case. It's not as easy as just telling women, hey, the nuclear family is important. They don't know that, they don't care about that. You have to convince them that it is for their own sake. And for the women who won't be convinced, who will just spend all of their beauty on hookups and who will just fall for the hedonism meme in reality, well, don't worry about them. I know that it's a thing that a lot of men get really upset over, will say, oh, the women are ruining themselves. Yes, absolutely. They are ruining themselves and it's none of your problem. It's very sad, but it's just the way it is. Society will get rid of the elements that are not able to perpetuate society. At the end of the day, even the tragic fate of women who will die alone and childless will be a benefit to society because it will encourage more women, especially the young ones, to preserve themselves because they will once again have the example of what happens when you don't do that. So you can expect massive changes to also come that way. But at the end of the day, these changes will just happen by themselves. You don't have to worry about them. You have to worry about you. Think about it in that fashion. Your future wife is somewhere out there. The moment where you get her, you want to be at a point where you will have enough value that she will want to follow you. And that really is all that you need to care about. It's selfishness. Women will be convinced to do the right thing because they'll be selfish and they'll see that their benefit is in them. And you, to be able to achieve this, to become the beacon that she will want to follow for her own sake, need to be selfish at the start to become a man of value. And eventually, as I stated, this is going to result in a union. The selfishness is going to result in a union. You don't want to be the guy who is never selfish and never develops. You don't want to be the guy who only develops and become an hermit that is a sigma and detached from women. You want to meet that woman at the perfect time and then take her with you. And I can tell you for a fact that every single benefit you will provide that woman, she will pay back tenfold, because at some point as a man, the only way to evolve forward is, of course, to have children, and most importantly, to have a woman by your side. I'm going to end with these words. The video is already way too long. Just a reminder that to have kids, you have to have a woman, and not just a woman that is going to serve as a womb, but someone that you are going to be able to convince to have kids with. And the only way to do that is, bingo, to be high value. If you're high value, a woman will want to have kids with you because she'll think, damn, I need to secure that DNA right now. It's as simple as that. Everything else of this, again, obsession over the trad wife of your dream, all of that is just a diversion that is going to take you away from what really matters, and that really matters is you. And I'm going to leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed the video that I thought was going to be 20 minutes and ended up being an hour plus. I'm wishing every single male on this channel and women a happy Valentine's Day. I hope that you are spending it with a loved one. And if you are not, work on yourself until you are so attractive that someone will want to attach themselves to you. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.